This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I always try to bring on interesting and different guests onto this show to talk about the Browns from different perspectives, and this is the first one here. I have Ken CARMAN from 92.3 The Fan here. Ken, how's everything going? How are you dealing with the general Browns environment the last couple of weeks?
It's not been the type of hysteria that I've seen in the years past. I think a lot of people are pretty pensive right now. I think it's been surprising coming off a playoff appearance. But I think that, just because of the whole, should he play in the preseason? Should he not? Should he have still played against Seattle? That whole thing. Mm-hmm. I think that that's been one of the things that have kind of stuck out to a lot of people. And I think because of that, I think people are just tired of having that conversation. And because of that, I think that that's why it's kind of made some people kind of ease into the season. I think after next Sunday, it'll be a big deal. But as of right now, they just want to see what's going on.
I think this has been a progressive thing that's happened since 2018, right? Because this franchise, this team has constantly been in a place where during the offseason, at least, 2018 going to 19, pretty much a lot of excitement, trade for Odell Beckham. People think the team's going to go and elevate. And then the 19 to 20 offseason, is what it is. Then you have the 2021. And it's like every offseason, it feels like Browns fans are getting ready for it being the year in a different way than we jokingly used to say it back when the team was like horrible, before that period of time. But it's like there's actual reason to think that the team could be good, but there were a bunch of things that get in the way. Deshaun gets suspended and then doesn't play that well coming back, or you get a ton of injuries. Your defense is horrible in 2022. And it just feels like a lot of Browns fans have gone through that cycle so many times since 2018 that they really want to see it in a more tangible way than this is just going to be a fun winning team, kind of like last year's was. I think they want to see it be a legitimate contender to win. We're talking about who has the best chance to win in December. The Browns are like a legitimate part of that conversation. And I think that's kind of a natural consequence of trying to improve and get from, a 3-win team or a relative 4-win to 6-win team like they were for most of the expansion era to where you are now. I think a lot of people are concerned. Are they going to plateau? Are they going to be one of those teams that can only get to the second round? And I think that's kind of where those questions are. And those questions, like even if they win week 1, week 2, they could start out hot. Those questions aren't going to be easy to quiet. Now, excitement's going to happen if you win like 3 games in a row. We know how Browns fans are. It doesn't take much, but it's still something that lingers there to the point to where the team was like, on that hot run last year. And there were still people like not as optimistic as you would think about the Browns' chances against the Texans going into that game before any of the pick sixes happened from Joe Flacco or any of the bad stuff in that game really went down. So I think it comes down to that too. Like we've been in this spot, I think, for the better part of 6 years. And I think people just want to see it happen. We've been wondering if the quarterback we're starting is going to be a franchise quarterback for 6 years, like Baker Mayfield to Deshaun Watson. It's been that.
They want him to prove it. I think that's why there's like this mood of like pensiveness. Like with Joe last year, I think a lot of people are like, all right, let's just have fun with it and see where it goes. And then when it ended in Houston, like I wasn't that mad. I don't think I wasn't around anybody who was that mad. It was kind of like, oh, well, that's the way it goes. And then I'd been saying the whole time, like, Joe's not coming back. Get that out of your head. They ain't going to have him back for a multitude of reasons that I think we've all probably got into a million times over already. And so it became, now they want to see him get there because there's a couple of things here that the players that they have, they love Nick Chubb. They love Myles Garrett. They love Denzel. They love other guys on the team. They've been there for a long time. They want to see those guys get to a Super Bowl. They want to see them get to as far as they possibly can. but they don't know whether or not the quarterback can take him there. Now, there's people who just are never going to like Deshaun, and that's the way it is. And there's people who are always going to love Deshaun, and that's the way that is too. But I think that in the most part, the regular fan in Cleveland, the regular Browns fan, just wants to see him do it, because if he can't do it this year, then there's serious consequences, not questions anymore, but all right, where does this team go from here? What do we do with salary? What are we going to do with these draft picks that we have? We're finally going to have a first round draft pick. So, like, I got into a big fight about it this morning about getting to the playoffs. And yeah, Browns fans expect more emotionally, but also in real life, the facts are if they get to the playoffs, we're probably not firing anybody. We're probably not getting rid of Deshaun Watson. We're probably not letting anybody go in terms, like, any big players go. We're probably going to find a way to restructure those contracts, including Deshaun's. There's a lot of things that you can get accomplished, and it can prove to the fans that Deshaun can be a guy to keep this team's head above water as they go through roster transition. Can be, and that to me is the definition of a franchise quarterback. He's not going to get your coaches fired. He's going to keep everybody on the same page. He keeps the fans understanding. He gets the fans excited when they win, when they're really competitive, and then if things gotta kind of have to be restructured again, he keeps everybody excited for the future there. So that's what they have to prove this year. And I think a lot of folks, they're tired of hearing, they get so mad over whatever excuse that someone makes. And it's like, that's not an excuse. That's just the truth of the matter. Like, they don't want to fire me. They do not want to go back to the way things were, where it was every other year someone was getting fired, a general manager, a head coach. They want stability as much as anybody there. So it's going to be a fragile balance where there's going to be people, if they make the playoffs and they like lose in the wild card or lose in the divisional round, I will get calls about firing a coach or firing a general manager, or Deshaun ain't enough or whatever it is. But in the real world, that means Deshaun is enough. The conference and the division is too good for them to make the playoffs for him to play poorly. In the real world, Andrew does a good job. In the real world, Kevin has done a good job and deserves to keep being the head coach of the Browns. Like, that's where I'm at right now. I deal in one part where, yeah, I need them to go as far as I can, because I don't want to have to deal with this every single year of whether or not he's good or not, just like we were doing with every other quarterback, by the way. I think that's frustrating too. I want to make sure that there's stability, because I do like the people that are in charge.
Yeah, and I had this conversation, I think, a couple days ago about the Browns have made progress, but it's not progress that's been codified. Like, it's still progress that can still easily be wiped away with a couple of bad seasons. If you have a couple of bad reactions in the building. And I think that is something the Browns have to be very aware of. It's like, what are your reactions going to be to a disappointing year if it happens? What are your reactions going to be to a disappointing finish? Sometimes, I think especially in the preseason, we get so caught up with like our record predictions and we go, okay, this team's going to win 10 games. We forget that there are a lot of ways that you can win 10 or 11 games, even 12 games in the NFL, that end up feeling pretty dissatisfying at the end of the year, right? It's not necessarily, Dallas, Pittsburgh, the year they went 11-0 and finished 1-2. Like, there are ways you can hit these markers and then still end the year pretty furious about how things went. And it's this constant game of like, you want to hit your expectations, but you also want to make sure that you don't collapse in a way that's embarrassing, because nothing gets people fired more than embarrassment. Right? Like, especially in the NFL.
It's a weird dance of how you go through a season. You can start out mediocre if you finish strong and you make the playoff, fine. If you do what Pittsburgh did, and I do have to take this into account as I shoot my mouth off about this stuff during the preseason. If a situation were to happen like Pittsburgh, where you make the playoffs a few years ago, but you started off 11-0, and I kept yelling at people that, man, there's some ugliness in there. There's sinkholes forming. And then once it finally got opened up, you saw how rotten it really was. The injuries that guys were like Cam Hayward was playing with. And I worry about that with this group, because I don't want to overreact to some of this stuff. But you only have a finite amount of time with some of these guys. I mean, some of these guys are vets that might not be here next year because of retirement even. So that's something that I think they have to take into account. Long story short, it's if you finish the season off nice, you get to the postseason, all right, everybody's fine. If you do a back end or something like that, and then you get blown out, yeah, it could be everything's on the deck. Every decision's on the deck. But ultimately, I think that they are so concerned with going back and making a decision that is the wrong decision that has long-term ramifications for this football team, that they finally were able to, after a lot of frustration and hard work and paying a lot of people to go away, finally to this level where I think the fans' expectations are higher than they've ever been. And not just expectations, but I think their standards higher than it's ever been. Like
That's
before,
a good word for it.
Yeah, it was just okay to make the playoffs. I do not believe it's okay to just make the playoffs for the regular fans anymore. To them, again, I'll stand pat and say yes, because there's a lot of things that if you make the playoffs, we can keep our heads about us and we can make proper decisions that need to be done for this football team without being emotional about it. But for the fans, that's not going to be enough. So it is uncharted waters here where before it was just so much to make the playoffs. It was this land that everybody else got to do, got to play in that we didn't. And now it's hard to adjust to the expectations while we're dealing with an old problem. And the old problem is whether or not the quarterback's going to play well or whether or not the quarterback's going to be healthy throughout the year. And I can't say he won't on either of those things, but I can't say 100% yes on either of those things yet. So people want to see it.
Yeah. One thing that I think about a lot is now we're entering, as we get further into this millennium, we're entering a period where there are a lot of Browns fans now who are of age, you know, been in around, sometimes some of them in the media, who have only really experienced the post-expansion Browns versus anything that happened pre-95. Yeah. And I wonder, because I would imagine in your position, you probably interact with a lot of different types of Browns fans from a lot of different generations. What do you notice, if you notice, like a difference between fans who kind of grew up with the expansion, with all of the since 99 stats that we have had to deal with, versus the fans who kind of still were old enough to remember what the Browns used to feel like before they were dealing with the whole expansion thing with Art Modell?
Old Browns fans, when they went through the team leaving and coming back, they're there no matter what. Mm-hmm. You know, there's been some fans who over the last few years have said, I'm not being a fan anymore. And they've been saying that stuff for 13 years that I've been on the air here in Cleveland, and they're still doing it. The new fan, the one who was born in 2000 and is now 24, mm-hmm. and that guy, that fan, like, you have their attention now. I still think it comes down to, like, you're in the area, and a lot of us from like the outer ring suburbs, they might grow up with other favorite teams, like as kids, as small kids, but eventually everybody's going to get a taste of the Muni lot, get a taste of what tailgating is like, get a taste of their friends, and being part of Browns football, they become Browns fans. The whole street were different fans when I was growing up. But again, that was while the Browns were leaving. This, I think that they like other teams more. They like other players more. They might still be Browns fans, but they really love Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. They are Browns fans. They really love Lamar Jackson. And for me, like before, it's easy for me to say I love Lamar Jackson, and I do. I think he's a great quarterback. But it's easy for me to do it because I'm doing this during the week, and then I'd be doing like a weekend show on the network where I'm talking to people in Topeka. So I have to be honest about where I'm at on all this. But the fans would not see it that way. They hated every other quarterback that played for the other teams. Now it's different. And I think that the Browns have to earn it a little bit more with some of the younger teams. I don't think it's as ingrained with them as much as it is with us. And I think that some of that is maybe because they grew up, they saw some of the frustrations that their dads had for the team, that their grandpas had, their parents, all together. And I think that they're like, why are you guys wasting your time with this? Like, they need to earn your love. They need to earn your trust. And if they don't, like, yeah, man, like someone might be a Browns fan, but they're like, hey, man, I really like Josh Allen. And they might go out and buy a Josh Allen jersey. That's been a struggle for me to understand. Like, we got a producer 26 years old, 27 years old. And I like Zeke Elliott. I'm a Cowboy fan. When they're not playing the Browns, I'm like, okay, like all the NFL is really still set up good versus evil, us versus them. And that is still difficult to swallow. That's the generation gap that I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because if I look back at, like, even when I was growing up, it was kind of like the Browns were never in style. Like it was never really like in vogue to be a Browns fan. It was always something you kind of had to explain. And I grew up in the city itself.
And
Um,
one of the things you're right about, you're right about that. And one of the other things is that, like when they went and they got Odell, Odell was a totally different essence
mhm,
than anything that if you've never been to New York or you've never been to any of the big cities, New York, L.A., Paris, London, the whole thing. There's a lot about Odell you just didn't get. And when they got Odell, he was so exciting because it's like, all right, now for other people around the country, it's cool to be a Browns fan.
yeah.
Like it's something you grew up with, or someone is in a Browns backers group because they grew up in Lakewood and then they had to move after college or something like that. So they joined a Browns backers group in Arlington, Texas. Like now it's kind of cool to be a Browns fan. And then that ended poorly. And so we got that flash for like 3 years. I don't even know if it's 3 years, maybe even less, of like people wearing Browns jerseys because they were Odell fans. Like
Hmm.
when we were kids, I'm imagining I'm older than you. Like people wear Jerry Rice jerseys around. The Browns were gone. So down in Canton, I'm wearing a Jerry Rice jersey. I like the 49ers. I'm wearing a Steve Young jersey. I like Steve Young. Like there was a coolness to those players. Deion Sanders, there was a cool. I had his track shoes. I had his church shoes. Always tell that story. There was a coolness to Deion Sanders, and then we had the cool guy on our team. And I mean, he still finished with 1,000 yards one year, but no one wanted to hear it, and it became a total mess. But ever since then, we've been kind of struggling to find that cool vibe again with some of them.
Yeah, and it's like now, I mean, you got some of it with like a dude like Miles is like very interesting to non-Browns fans in a lot
Yeah.
of different ways. Nick Chubb is also one of those players. Like you have those players, and yeah, I think about it often, just how little the Browns had when I was like really getting into them, like in like 2007 in that, and how much more they have now than they've ever had, where it's like the Browns usually had like maybe one player that's as
Mhm.
good as Denzel Ward and then like somebody else who's like probably as good as Martin Emerson. This team is just so stacked and loaded with them. It's just such a foreign place. Now, I know that you are somebody who has an online presence a little bit more than like most on-air folk, I think. And I think you do a really good job with it. As somebody who does work in that on-air world, well, what do you think the differences are just from how the fan base interacts now with all this online stuff and all the online interaction versus what you do on the mornings with Anthony Lima?
Well, I think they're more apt to send tweets, to send messages. I mean, now we have the voicemail function that's really already picked up steam. It's only been out for a couple of weeks. Yeah, I think that it's always been again like 1% of listeners actually call, and of the
Mm,
1% of listeners that actually call, probably 5% of those actually hang on for people get nervous and they hang up, and so you can't always use that as a the total reaction to everything. Browns Mondays, there's a lot. Maybe it's 2% of the people that actually call in, but I think that online, Twitter has changed. Twitter's kind of become this weird place where I had to kind of learn how to work through it. I can't argue with everybody who has like a BoJack Horseman avatar or something like that. Like I can't take that seriously. Um, and trying to respect people's opinions on it because it's a place where they can kind of do their own thing.
yeah.
And I try not to be dismissive of any of those things because I think that that's always going to be where we're going in the future, whether it be Spaces or TikTok or Twitch or IG or anything like that. I think that those are things that you have to be somewhat involved in and at least give people something that it's not all serious and you can't take it seriously. Um, it's a very it's just a moving target almost
Mm,
because I look at like when Twitter changed over, like I always had this like gag where like I get in there and you sit down and I'm sitting there with Owen, my producer, and it's like you click on one thing that's trending, you go down like three things and it's just X-rated stuff. You're like, I can't. The most innocuous stuff is X-rated, so it's changed. It's
hmm.
changed dramatically there, and
Yeah.
it's some of it's been for the good, like with Spaces, and some people do Spaces really well. Um, but with us, it's just a lot of being. I think it's very important to try to interact with people, to try to have a back and forth, but also the context misses. I try to promote to listen to a clip or to listen to a segment or listen to a show right before we're about to do a segment or something like that. Because I think a lot of context gets missed. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've had people cuss me clean out. And then I'm like, well, that's not what I'm, oh, you know what? I read that wrong. I'm sorry. I took that as a thing. And then I've done it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've had opinions and like I knew it was going to be unpopular. And I've taken people, I had a mistake yesterday with somebody because I didn't read it right. And just being willing to say you're sorry to somebody online kind of counts for something there. Being willing to say you're sorry on air is kind of counts for something there. So it's a moving thing, but I take it for what it is. I take it for an enjoyment, but I also take it as something that, I mean, your presence is online. You host a YouTube show. I mean, these things can also get us guys like you and me in a lot of trouble,
Mm-hmm.
if we use it for the wrong thing.
Yeah, and it's also like this weird balance of figuring out how many people are engaging that are watching, because like the vast majority, like you said, don't really engage. A lot of people just have you on in the car, and they have their thoughts, they have their opinions about what you're saying, but they're not vocalizing those things directly to you in the way that your callers might. And then like how many of your callers or people who tweet at you, and this is where the context thing becomes very difficult. If I'm having a conversation with the person, I can tell relatively what state of mind they're in, how old they are, some element of like what their perspective is coming from. Like you have so much context just having that face-to-face
Yeah.
interaction or just knowing who it is that you're talking to. When I'm talking to an anime avatar on Twitter, I don't know if that dude's drunk. I don't know if it's like a kid. Like I don't know what is going on there. And like I always fear, I'm like, did I just have a very hard reaction to somebody who was legitimately just asking a question and did not know or could not know? Like, and I just kind of blasted off because I thought this was a perfect time to get my stuff off about a certain topic that I felt like people were acting in bad faith on. It is, you have all this information, but at the same time, you're kind of flying blind and it's
I,
hard to navigate.
I get frustrated with myself. Like if I get worked up over something like that, just because I, uh, I just don't want to be that way with folks. I don't. And again, a lot of it's misunderstanding, and a lot of it's people just trying to rattle cages, whatever. But I have been blessed to have a lot of people who just seem to get it, and so I don't get necessarily the type of things that some of the other hosts get in the city, that some of the other people in their cities get. Just because I do try to have some sort of a dialogue, but with time that goes over, I don't I think it's so important to not lose that presence, but it's also so important to not take it as the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be guys that take something I say and mix it up and tell people I said something that I did not say, and they can listen to it, or something that is they heard on some other show. And I am picking up more and more now, because we have that app, and the app has the rewind, and you can listen to it throughout the day. Like we've had more people where I'm getting replies to stuff we talked about at 7:20 in the morning. I'm getting stuff at 3:40 in the afternoon, or I'm getting stuff at like 6 o'clock when guys just get home or something like
Mm-hmm.
that from work. And there's more people using it in its podcast form. So I have to get used to. There's an immediacy that happens at 7:20 where I'm in the mood, I'm in the moment, but I also kind of have to make a little bit of time here and there to go back and try to answer some people, because I want them to know that I appreciate their time. I mean, it really is their time, it really is their attention. And sometimes they're not paying attention, they hear something, and what did I hear? But these things happen. I do it all the time, and they do it all the time. But I want to make sure that their time is appreciated. Even if, I mean, I said something stupid earlier today. So Danny asked me about whether or not I would take a competitive Guardians team instead of the Royals. And I had said yes, because it was stupid, because I was sitting there thinking about, well, I mean, I've got a lot more content out of the Cleveland Guardians than I have I think that over my buddies I know who have hosted in Kansas City have had over the Royals, and they won a World Series. But as a fan, I would want the Guardians to win. I've said that about the Cavs to Lima to his face. I've enjoyed a championship. So I said something stupid, Guy calls me up. I was like, yeah, that was dumb. That was dumb. I had to reevaluate. And I'm getting, you really said that earlier this morning. It's like 12:45 and I'm getting tweets about that. It's like, yeah, so people are using it at different times, and I have to be, they find me when they find me, and I have to be respectful of their time. And I mean, I feel you have the same thing. I mean, you have live viewers and things like that, but you also have people who pick it up at different times, and I want them to know that they're respected in their fashion. I know that sounds like lip service, and I've said that a long time, but I do want them to know that they're respected, because we all say dumb stuff, and I've said dumb things. I said dumb things earlier today, and I'll say dumb things tomorrow. Hopefully, not all of it's stupid, but some of it, yeah, it's definitely gonna be stupid.
Yeah, sometimes on like YouTube, they'll pick up a video from like 4 years ago. Like my first year of doing it, and then I'll get this take. I can't believe you thought Kyler Murray was better than Lamar. I've been roasting myself for that take for like 4 years, but it's to somebody that's brand new.
Yeah, if you wait long enough, all of us are wrong. All of us are wrong. Any opinion you have, I could sit there and tell you Tom Brady's the greatest ever, and by the time 10 years comes around, Mahomes is going to be the greatest ever, and you look like an idiot. Same thing with LeBron and Michael. Same thing with a lot of things. You just wait around long enough, we're all wrong.
Well, Ken, I want to thank you for your time and your insight here. Appreciate all of that. Make sure you go check out Ken's show. I mean, it feels weird trying to push it because it's such a popular and well-known show.
No, I need promotion I can get. I'm shameless, but I do want to say, anybody who's watching this, we had the heat issue on Tuesday. I had to go pick my kids up from school, because then it became, well, since you're not going to have football practice, you can go pick up the kids. So I was originally supposed to do this with you on Tuesday. Quincy made arrangements to do this on Wednesday with me, so you were able to move around for me. I really appreciate that. I want everybody to know how good a guy you are, because you really were willing to work with me and make sure that this was all moved around and make sure I could do this on my phone and this one old studio here at Fox 8. So I got that. Yeah, this is not my house. I'm over at a TV studio right now. So, but thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you for coming on. But everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.